right. Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday. Look at Phumi Mashiko. Look at that little streak of grey going on there, Pums. You see that there?
It's been going on since my 20s.
Really? I've never noticed it
Oh,
before.
wow.
Because I used to have dreadlocks. No, because I used to have dreadlocks, right?
All right.
And
Look at
then,
that. Very distinguished.
so it's like,
It's very distinguished.
it's just obviously getting more and more and more and more.
What does your son think of it?
He doesn't even notice it.
Really, it's what moms are.
This is like mom.
That's what mom. So listen, first of all, you were away last week and we were worried that you had been summoned to Nongoma.
Yes.
I wasn't summoned, but I was in KZN.
I know, that's why we were very suspicious about what you might be doing, what you might be up to over there.
But guys, that I'm that kind of Zulu. That kind of Zulu. And it was a hard time. I needed to be in the kingdom with my people. I actually had a meeting that was about something completely unrelated. But we did spend, of the 4 hours we were in the meeting, we probably spent 2 hours just kind of speaking about history and who's who and what, just because
That's special.
with old people,
course.
that's how it is, people were
Right.
feeling all their feelings, all the old guys I was with, feeling all their feelings.
You must have heard by now then, particularly in your meeting last week, that I have willingly, after much thought and deliberation, decided not to take up the position of being the new Zulu king. Yes.
They must be devastated. They must be
devastated. The devastation is widespread. Widespread.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yes.
I get it. But it was just something I had to do. I'm very much committed to my work
We
at
need
Cliff
you
Central.
Here. We need you
being
here.
a king. I just couldn't do it. So
Too much
it's one of
work for
those
you,
things. Too much.
You've actually made the right decision. In fact, that kind of decision is precisely what would have made you the right person for the job.
Listen, don't get me started on the
selfless.
singing and dancing every day. That would have been incredible, but couldn't.
Politicians and many rulers who are not hereditary rulers, who were not chosen for that role by God, is that they often just power hungry, Sia. We know with you this is the case, and Pumi's right. You would have been perfect for the job, but alas. Now
I'm so
alas,
and because I'm so humble, I'm so modest. I just hate talking about myself, and especially because Sia doesn't like talking about himself in third person, which is just the sign of vanity. But that's not me.
Sia would have hated to be called, Your Majesty and all of that stuff.
Oh, no.
You're very much liberal.
All the genuflecting, all the, all of that would have just been too much.
Of course, Sia wouldn't have firstly commissioned all new towels with HRHSS embossed engraved there. No.
It would never have worked. It's just as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Pums, how are things going? You moved into new offices the other day, and I suppose things are up and running there now. So, are you back to normal? Are you post-pandemic now? No? Explain.
Things are not up and running. Of course, you gotta wait for service providers, internet service providers, cell phone service providers. But my furniture's arriving today, so that's quite exciting. We're not in the office. I just took delivery from the construction guys, so the furniture arrives today.
That's very exciting.
It is quite exciting. It is actually so. Today's like a big unboxing day for me. It's like unboxing furniture.
I spent yesterday sorting out. Well, I was about to start sorting out outside the house. There are a couple of things that need attention. I need to paint things. I need to fix things, and oh my God! Then it started raining. And
You
that's
have to
what
wait a couple more months for the exterior painting because
I
it's
know.
going to stop raining in like 2 months, and then it's the perfect time.
Well, it was like an outside-inside area, so it was like veranda, and I thought this needs a bit of attention. So I probably could have done it with the rain going on, but it was pretty cold yesterday. I won't lie. I mean, I was walking around. You couldn't just be wearing like summer gear yesterday, so I had to make do with other things and got some work done instead, which is probably a
So,
good thing. We have to do.
you
You
know,
have to do all these things. You have to juggle many balls, right?
Oh, okay.
That's true.
right up there, Sia, right up there. That's
No.
Look, get ready to roll your eyes when I'm talking Durban weather, but I've been so disappointed by the weather here this week. It's very just ugh, not a lot of sunshine. I've actually had to wear like long pants or a hoodie. This is not the Durban I've come to know and love.
No, no, no.
Mm-mm.
I saw that the at the risk of being boring and speaking about the weather, but this time of the year
Mm,
unfailingly reminds me of how, like about 15 years ago when I was building the house, I didn't have enough money to fit. We have a concept fireplace here, which was supposed to be like a
Mhm.
fire pit and whatever, and they built it incorrectly. But I was too young then to throw my weight around. They didn't have the kind of Phumi that was building an office that like
mm.
swings her hips or 40
Mm.
years of experience
And did you
coming in.
know? Did you know at that point already this was not going to be a good idea?
Oh God, when I arrived and saw the what they've
Oh.
constructed, I was just like, guys, this is not gonna work. And they were like, no, but the plans and I was like, fireplaces
Mm-mm.
have a particular ratio, the way that the opening is, and wait, this is not gonna work. And they were like, so I said, okay, we'll see. Let's just build a fire in it and see how the fire and the smoke performs. So then they came up with the fix, but I didn't have enough money then because it was unbudgeted for. I thought, oh, I'll do it. I'll do it maybe next year or the year after that when I've settled. It's been 15 years, guys.
Oh
And
my god!
sad for me
Right.
to say that 15 years later, I'm poorer than I was when I was building this house, right?
Oh
Because
no.
I feel the same way. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
definitely.
because when you get older, so many more things like eat into your budget. And Gareth, you don't have this particular problem, but
Children.
children.
Mm.
Oh.
Listen, so my brother has
It's
two.
like a
My brother has
baby.
two, and I'll tell you what. So what is it? Because every year they publish like the cost of a child. If you want to get your kid through a decent school and you want to get them to university, they always give you a number. And I think last year it was something between 1 and 2 million rand per child. Right?
And that's not even feeding them or clothing them.
No, 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 no. So it's crazy expensive, and I always
Because
think,
can you believe they have to eat 3 times a day?
oh my god, no, no, it's ridiculous.
3 times.
No, it's craziness. It's mad.
And if it's a little boy as well. Oh.
Oh, a growing young man.
Mm-mm.
That's a
So
real
I'm just
problem.
saying to all our
Keeps you out of
listeners,
house and home.
if you don't have kids yet, just think twice. Let me be because I'm obviously not a good example of this, right? Let me just be a terrible warning of how broke you could be. just,
Oof.
just,
Mm.
I'm just saying, guys. And this time of the year, every year, I'm just like, it's getting cold and I still don't have a fireplace.
Oh,
Ugh.
see,
And you remember.
Yeah, because
you
in December, I don't need it, right? It's like all outside and
no, you don't.
lovely.
You don't
And
care about and we do spend most of our time, most of the year here because it's mostly pleasant. It's like maybe 3.5 months of proper winter. The rest of the time you can go outside. And you've just reminded me I have to order like firewood because I have a fireplace and I make actual fires in winter. And it's the only there are
Oh.
three things about it. I've gone on about this so many times, and I know we're not even in winter yet, so people are going to get bored. But number one is that feeling when you get into bed at night in winter that it's snug and warm and lovely. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is a roaring fireplace, like that.
it's
Just
sexy.
yes, it's nice. And then, but you've got
It's,
to burn wood, or it mustn't be one of those electric things that
no.
and they make really good ones that are probably more energy efficient. Blah blah blah. people are going to say eventually you shouldn't be burning stuff because you know how environmentalists are. It's always a
You
new
must see the
horizon.
flame. You must see the
Got to
flame
see it.
dancing.
Yeah. And the
Oh.
other one is some of those winter foods like soups and curries and things like that that make it nice. Those are the only things about winter that I like. And I must get ready for it now because it's coming at us whether we like it or not. And duvets have got to go into beds. And by the way, do you think it's too early to start
No,
doing that stuff?
no,
No.
no.
Is there a specific date that you allow yourself to do it? I always used to say the 1st of May is the earliest you can do that stuff.
So are
Why?
you gonna
Why torture yourself?
are you gonna be freezing for a whole other month? So for the
Mm.
next month, when we have a day like this, you're just gonna be like waiting for the 1st of May. Oh, you're an idiot.
No. I'm going to see if
Mm.
I can't follow my rule. I can't. I'm not. I'll admit it right here on the show.
You'll
Okay,
die
cool.
on that
Gareth,
hill.
So
something
I
like
just
that
want.
is not rule based. Just
No, I
do it
know
when you
it's
need to do it.
not.
I'm a person who feels no scam at all for one night only if I feel extra chilly, even if it's in the middle of summer, to bring out all of my blankets and I'm layered up, and then I'll have to pop it in the wash afterwards as well. But it's if I need to, I need to.
No, see, you see, I've got to learn to do that. I create these dumb, completely uncoordinated with reality rules in my head. And some of them are good and some of them kind of help me achieve things and others just get in the way. And you're right, this one must go.
Yeah.
So, Holmes,
Yeah,
I
Paul.
wanted I wanted to ask you very seriously though, because I know that you love history and you love the history of the Zulu kingdom, and it's something that you're actually quite au fait with. I just want to know your reflections on what's been happening since the king died, and what you make of kind of some of the stuff that's been going on ceremony wise. What you can maybe share with us that you would know, especially because you're talking to people who we might not be able to hear from or see in mainstream media, and it would be interesting to have your reflections.
So all of this, I was deeply disappointed, as I was. You remember I told you guys when at the last royal wedding, I remain deeply disappointed by the fact that our our government, arts and culture, tourism, all of those guys don't take advantage of
Mhm.
such a sitting duck, as it were,
It's such a
because
monstrous cultural opportunity.
and also just in order to like get South Africa out into the world again and have think about what the royal wedding. So as much as we've heard and seen about Meghan Markle and
Yeah,
Harry, their wedding boosted the economy of the UK by something
yeah,
like 1 billion US dollars
yeah.
because of TV rights, because of tourism, because all of those kinds of things, and we don't take any advantage of that. And you can see how seriously the people of KwaZulu take it. And you can see just how they showed up, how they, all of those things.
Americans don't know a lot about us, but they do know the word Zulu, and they
Mm.
Absolutely.
and people all over the world, even if they don't know anything about any of our languages or whether or not we have lions walking in our streets, and people tend to be kind of silly if they've never been here before, but everybody I think can find some reference to Zulu or to Shaka Zulu or to the fact that we have these kingdoms, these old kingdoms in South Africa. And we could have taken, I agree with you, we could have taken advantage of this. I mean, we could be selling like little Zulu assegais and shields. Uh, we could sell millions of those things to people all over the world. We could be putting on a bit of a show, and we could have.
An absolute show. I mean, it lends itself. It lends itself to that. And then I think also locally we missed out on an opportunity to learn about each other a little bit more. My favorite
Mm.
thing to watch last week is the way that kind of mainstream media had this cognitive dissonance of not knowing whether to directly translate words
Oh.
and then didn't take the opportunity to kind of have historians on site, have conversations with people about the language, about the etymology of stuff. About it was even yesterday when the statement came out over the weekend. And everybody on Twitter lost their minds because the statement from Umntwana Utolona uMangosuthu that as of Friday, and the statement was literally, people can take out their hose.
Sorry.
What does he mean?
Oh my words. People were
What does he
losing
mean?
their minds. Well, it's absolutely literal translation, because when you are mourning, right? Ukuzila, when you're mourning, you suspend agricultural activity. So
Oh, okay.
a hoe
You meant
in
like
Zulu,
garden
igeja.
hose. Right. The
Yes.
tool that you use in the garden.
Yes. And so people were just like, and I was just like, oh Lord, the anglicizing of of the Zulu culture
Yeah.
is going to be the end of us all. Between the
I
planting,
missed that, but I
between the
love it.
planting and now the
Yeah,
host.
that's the word. When I saw them using planting on screen, I was like, "What are these people? Have they used the wrong word? Is this disrespectful?" But it's as you said, literal translations, because they haven't got someone in the language department in any of these places
It's
to
not
explain.
even it. Look, and I think it's not even that they don't have someone in the language department. It's just a blatant display of not caring beyond the surface. That's what it was. It was just what is it? It's like, okay, plant, like planting. Okay, planting. That's the planting.
Which
And
people
they
then
move
took
on.
when and I mean we were even talking about it last week and saying, is this the correct thing to say? And I couldn't believe that it would be, because
It's well, if you say it
it
in
actually
Zulu, it
sounds more
is.
disrespectful when you say it like that, like you're planting him like a tree. But some people would say,
It-
no, that's exactly what you should be. Is that
But
correct,
in
Pums?
Zulu, but in Zulu, it is. It's the correct thing to say if you say it in the right language.
Internet issue here. This happened yesterday as well. I don't know what's going on. Pums, can you hear me?
Oh no. Yeah, you're back now.
No,
I
so
can hear you.
planting is just a pure literal translation, and no one's really applied their mind. Is it is there other stuff that you saw that you thought, I wish I could explain this to people, having some insight?
There is the one other thing is, I keep seeing everybody, because now he's become like a new sensation. The main guy that was leading Amabut, right?
Mm,
And everybody wants to talk to him now, and everybody wants to interview him, and I think, I think he's in pain. He's mourning, and so
mm,
he's a little bit sharp. I think he's a little bit sharp with everybody, because, as you can imagine, when you are in
yeah,
a bad state, right, you have a low tolerance for all sorts of bullshit,
yeah.
and I think he's going through some of that, and people seem to think it's funny.
But maybe they
Okay,
do.
and I'm
Mm,
just like,
And then they make that mistake that he is representative of all the Zulu people.
hmm,
He has one bad interview,
hmm.
and look how angry Zulus are.
But I don't feel a need to explain to people who are uninterested, people who
Mhm.
have been interested, people who want to know, and it's also been quite fascinating to watch how much tribalism keeps rearing its ugly head in South Africa.
How so? That's interesting. I didn't pick any of that up. I actually thought there was, certainly from my very limited point of view, I saw a lot of people who maybe it's also because I'm hanging around with people like me who are interested in history, and who who care about this cultural stuff, because I have the same feeling when I'm watching a president transition in America, or when I'm
Mm,
seeing a new
mm.
monarch in Europe being crowned. Maybe I'm just messing around and in circles where people care. But where does this tribalism? I haven't seen any of that.
So there was quite a lot on, particularly kind of in the social media spaces, right? There
Yeah.
was there was also quite a lot of disparaging remarks about the displays of pride, cultural pride. So some people felt that it's all too much is being like given to the Zulus and their and their king and all. Why is this on national news? Why are we all, why? And I was just like,
Oh,
for the same reason that I feel we could have done more about it, even on an international stage. I feel that it's unnecessary. I mean, and then what turned around, what came back, is a lot of people feeling like Zulu people are a threat because they're so overwhelming, they're so united,
but a
and they're
threat to what?
warrior-like. Oh my
Yeah,
God!
but
So
you
it's,
know that's
if
also
you think about it,
that's what you get if you're the majority, though, and if your language has been so dominant throughout the last 300 years. I suppose that's just a little bit of really sad small man jealousy coming from some corners.
well, it's not just jealousy, because if you think about kind of in the early 90s, the view and a lot of what we saw, if you see large crowds of big men
Mm,
wielding
yeah,
traditional weapons and
not
spears,
getting in
is,
assegais and shields and yeah.
for a lot of people, kind of thinking back to the 90s and
Mm,
that very precarious time in our transition where there was a lot of violence, which was in a very big way packaged as a tribal violence, even
Mm,
though we now know better and we know that it was a specially formulated fight back strategy.
mm,
It's still, for a lot of people, that's still very raw in their minds. And when we think about, every now and again we have these flare ups of xenophobia in this country, those kinds of things, when you see that level of organization and togetherness, and the fact that there are people who have the voice that are able to command that kind of
mm.
mass of people, it can be a little bit scary. But again, because we're not doing the work of educating and getting to know each other, and being open-minded about what we're seeing in front
I
of
suppose
us.
that would be like watching, all the military parade around at the funeral of a British sovereign and thinking, well, this is a show of force to the rest of the world. This is like we're showing off our military, which it isn't. It's just them paying their respects, and it's exactly the same for Zulu warriors who are busy displaying their sadness and they're in mourning. How they do that is just a show of force.
You show up.
I guess it's
Bless
something
you.
that is lost on me. And granted, because I only grew up in KZN, I didn't think about it much. But I didn't know tribalism was still such a thing up until I
Oh,
moved. Up until I moved up to Johannesburg, and little things like walking into a room and greeting, I would greet and just say sawubona, and it would be
Mm.
a thing of, you just think you Zulus all think the same.
everybody.
How dare you walk in and not just see us for who we are? I'm like, okay, well,
I,
clearly
I
this
my, my
greeting.
my default's also Sawubona, but then I say to people, if they give me any lip, I say to them, yeah, try that attitude with a taxi. That-
But even that, see, even that
I know that's yeah, I know.
is precisely part of it, of where, and it's little things, right? It's little things that
Mm,
just keep creeping up
Mm.
and keep creeping up. And because our attentions are so, we're so tightly wound at the
I know.
moment.
mm.
I don't know if it's, I'm not sure if it's like the pandemic anniversary, or like,
Well,
but
I'll tell you,
but we are so tightly wound. Everybody is just like
and
ready
people are
to.
people are looking for reasons to get cross with each other. It's extraordinary. So there are a couple of things I want to get to in a minute. We've got to talk about the Tanzanian president because I mentioned him briefly yesterday.
Oh,
People were crying.
yes.
People were crying on TV. I mean, you know, when we were very upset when Madiba died, but I think we handled it with a little more kind of emotional maturity. And although there were people who were sad, it wasn't like a national, like a North Korea, where the newsreader breaks down, when Kim Jong Il dies. And there were even 5 people who were killed in a stampede to view his body, which is
It
bizarre.
is,
We got to talk about
it's
that,
like,
just related to the
yeah.
king. But first, I just want to read you this, Pums, along the lines of what you were saying about people who are really interested. Andrew sent me this. I'm assuming Andrew's a white guy, but he sent me this yesterday about the Zulu succession. He said, love your show, been listening for under a year now, blah, blah, blah. Listening to you guys talking about the Zulu succession principle or the lack thereof also got me really interested. I discovered a few years ago that I, in fact, worked with a Xhosa royal. I'd recognized the surname, so that must have been Mtirara. Huh? And jokingly asked if he was related to King Sandile. Turns out that he was. About 2 weeks back, he was summoned. Listen to this. He was summoned to KwaZulu-Natal along with his entire family. 1 minute he was at work. Next, a car was sent and he was gone. I was confused as to why a Xhosa prince would be summoned to Zulu King's palace. And on his return, I asked him what the connection was. Turns out the Xhosa queen was, in fact, King Goodwill's sister and my colleague's grandmother. Yesterday, after listening to your podcast, I decided to ask my colleague a few questions because I found it really interesting. Because the king was polygamous, the future king's identity was named in his will to keep him safe from his brothers that could be jealous and possibly the king's brother and his children. The queen who was put in charge is in fact the king's third wife, which I found strange, but apparently that's because his third and sixth wives are themselves Swazi royals. According to my colleague, the future king will in all likelihood be the son of the third wife. Had neither the third wife or the sixth had any sons, then the king's brother would have been the next in line to the throne. Once again, love the show. Hopefully Sia doesn't shit his pants, regard Andrew. But you see, I mean, like, people are really into this stuff.
Good up until that point, Andrew.
Yeah, I love it.
No, that's all fascinating. It's still just
Right.
the power, the responsibility, the power dynamics, and how it all gets played out.
And for headlines, just before headlines, Pums, I want to know what you think of this. Should I accept this friend request? Let me just show you. Look at the top of my screen here.
Hey now.
Angelo Agrizzi. Should I accept his friend request?
Do you think it comes with free chicken?
Well, if he was still at Bosasa and he was handing out all those bribes, I'd say sure, because then I could have got a nice pile of money. Except I don't know how I would help with state capture. You know, I'm not a minister or anything.
Gareth, you lie down with dogs, my friend.
Yeah, I'll just clear. I don't know that this is for me. All right, let's look at the headlines. Starting off with something from EWN, Eyewitness News. There's quite a lot of stuff to catch up on. By the way, yesterday we said, thanks to Basitsana, she filled us in on that Suez Canal crisis. They're apparently trying to dig that ship out now. I saw the pictures in the news yesterday, and I couldn't believe it, because while we were, literally as we were starting the show, Basitsana let us know. She's like, oh, you guys you have to know what's going on here. There's a lot of craziness happening in the Suez Canal. So let's start off with this. Apparently, at the State Capture Commission, and Pums, you can maybe give me some detail on this, because there's been a lot of action there this week too. A phone call to a Gupta brother led to Koko's suspension being called off at Eskom. So, did you watch any of this? Are you up to date with what's going on there?
I missed this week because it's a short week, which is like...
You missed Dalimpofu?
Yeah, I missed Dalimpofu, and I saw the snippets, and I was just like, whoop, Dali. See, highly strung. Everybody is tightly wound, right? Missed that whole Bain, and I think a lot of people haven't paid enough attention to the Bain testimony, because that Bain, and I think last year sometime I told you guys about the affidavit and all of and how interconnected and how integral Bain has been to the system being what it's become, and the various people that they put in place. It was a whole strategy that started and that is unbelievable. Guys, pay attention to that, because it goes way further and way deeper than just the Guptas and Zuma and 17 marketing meetings.
But what do you mean? What do you mean way deeper? I mean, like, that's a very that's a big thing to say. What do you mean?
No. So Bain does consulting work, and they They do organizational development, and they do kind of strategic placements and all of that kind of stuff. And apparently they had 17 different meetings with Jacob Zuma. These meetings are termed marketing meetings. I don't know what we're marketing with the president, but anyway.
Right.
But the strategy document, which was circulating last year on WhatsApp groups, actually outlines a across different SOEs and different companies, and how various individuals would be strategically placed either as CEOs, CFOs, and all in order to be able to have a particular level of influence, sorry guys, a particular level of influence, not just on the decision making, but on the procurement decisions
Right.
across all of those organizations. So it's not just the Guptas. I mean, this is a much deeper and much more well thought out project, which was what played out here. But again, if you go deep enough into history and
Yeah.
back and back and back in the way that our entire economy is constructed, it's always been constructed to benefit certain individuals more than others. The unfortunate thing that we've seen here in South Africa over the past couple of years is there has been no counterbalance. So before, and you can, I mean, you can look at it. Somebody was telling me about what's that, Mal Napiers, the guy who built the N4, right, the freeway, and then also gave
Okay.
money to Wits, a big bequeathment to Wits. He was, all those many years ago when the Afrikaners took place, he was in the midst of the state capture and made shitloads of money. But he
That's right.
didn't just take the money and run. He didn't buy 20 Lamborghinis. He probably bought 10 Porsches. But still, there's something there's something on the other
Well,
side
listen, I mean,
that's
you also
beyond just his
you
Porsches,
you can't get away with the kind of corruption that you could have got away with before social media as well, because people will see. Someone will post. In fact, most people post their own criminal activity. If you buy 10 cars, you can't wait to photograph them and share them on Instagram. It's the only way you're going to get any interest from other people.
Yeah, but listen, you can buy your 10 cars as long as it's not, if
What do
there's
you
a
want to say?
20
Yeah,
million, if there's a 20 million rand budget, you cannot spend 2 million on
yeah,
delivering what you're supposed to deliver and spend 18 on
on the
yourself.
cars. Yeah.
You know, it,
Are you saying
yes, Sia. Sia, you
have
want 10 Porsches.
have some
No,
class with corruption? Yeah, have some class.
excuse me. I just have my hand up quickly there. Sis Phumi, what word did you use? Bequeathment.
In bequest. It's money
Sia.
being given to an institution.
So what is that? Is it queefment?
No,
No, bequeath.
Oh, damn
with
it.
the TH.
I'm so
Queef.
disappointed. I was listening to you, but I thought if there's such a word as bequeathment, I need to rope into at least 6 of my sentences today. Damn it. Okay.
There is
Bequeath.
bequeath.
Okay, then.
So
I say let's make bequeathment a word.
we were speaking about the Zulu King's funeral last week and everything else. It turns out that after 3 months only, we will find out who the next monarch is. This was announced by Mangosuthu Buthelezi yesterday. Apparently, in the meantime, Queen Mantfombi Dlamini-Zulu will be the regent of the nation for the next 3 months. So there's going to be a big interregnum while we have a regent. And the loss of the king has been a tremendous blow, as all of us appreciate, Buthelezi said. Family must be allowed to grieve. The regent and the royal family have asked me that I impress upon the nation the late king's wish that people take out their hoes on Friday. And we found out what that means. So thanks to Phumi, otherwise we would have been confused by that too. So that's the latest on that one. He says that food security is important, by the way. That's why he wants people to start taking part in agriculture again. So that's going to carry on. Emirates have decided to extend the flight ban to South Africa. They have decided that'll carry on until the 8th of April. The move is in line with government's directives that restrict the entry of travelers originating from South Africa into the UAE. Do you know that at the moment, we are one of the countries in the world with the most travel restrictions? Very few places that we can go, and very few people that can come here. South Africa has the most tight travel restrictions, I believe, out of any country in the world right now. So that's not surprising that Emirates has decided to extend this, despite the fact, by the way, that it seems we are really getting our numbers under control. I want to play you a little clip just now of an Indian news broadcast. I always find it interesting that these things don't come directly to us, that our own
Okay.
media are not as good at reporting this stuff as we might be. So I'll play this for you at the end of the headlines, but it's an interesting little clip from an Indian news network about South Africa's numbers and what's really going on there. And I have no reason to disbelieve them. They're not a fake news network. They're a proper, big news organization in India. So unless you are, suspicious from the get-go, then I think maybe this is worth taking seriously.
But don't be suspicious.
Also, coronavirus is Germany's big.
Oh no. We've lost Gareth a little, and then he'll come back in a few seconds. But currently how he looks is not ideal.
Sorry,
there we go. You're back.
Okay, we're back. Yeah, it keeps breaking up. What, were you talking about the internet problems, or were you saying something about?
We were talking about you being mid-sentence. You were kind of stuck with your mouth open on our side.
Yes.
Very irritating. But I have noticed that everything on the internet this morning is very slow. Even just bringing up the news this morning on various sites, some of them are just not available, and I don't know if it's my internet or if it's everybody's. So Angela Merkel's got some problems at the moment because she is trying to make a plan for Easter. She's calling the plan a mistake, and she said she has to take ultimate responsibility for a bit of a U-turn here because she's cancelled plans for a strict lockdown over Easter. The proposed lockdown was agreed with regional leaders. The plan was reversed following a crisis meeting on Wednesday. It has been widely criticized by business leaders and scientists. The lockdown would have been the strictest in Germany yet, with most shops closed and gatherings limited. For 5 days over Easter from the 1st of April, Germans would have been asked to stay at home and reduce social contact. But she suddenly decided to change it. And she said, "The mistake is mine alone. The whole process has caused additional uncertainty for which I ask all citizens to forgive me." It seems that, like most politicians, we could probably trace this to a drop in the popularity polls for her party and for her. And also, they seem to have this more or less under control in Germany at the moment. So, why would you go to the trouble of putting people back into lockdown? Do you guys think that they're going to do that here? Do you think they're going to put us under lockdown again for Easter? Because I hear lots of rumors.
What I would like to see is not a big lockdown, but definitely a restriction on the numbers, because all we need now is for like 1 million people to go to Moria
I see what you mean.
and then travel all over the country. And then, I don't know, Easter week, those Easter services, those like long overnight virgils, all those things. I think we need a little bit of a restriction around those things, but I don't think we need, especially because we don't have a rollout plan. Do we have a vaccine rollout plan? No rollout
Well,
plan.
that's the golden question.
But wait, because I'll play you that news clip from India in a moment. It'll make you feel better. In the meantime, Fauci over in the US has said that authorities were considering cutting social distancing rules to 3 feet instead of 6 feet, a move that would change. I mean, this is just crazy, right? What difference does it make? Honestly.
Well, it's that, and how many masks now you use, and where you stand, and who coughs down your throat. It's, who knows?
As Gareth is sneezing terribly there in the background.
The virus hasn't changed its behavior. So how does, the virus doesn't change the way that it moves through the air. So how does cutting 6 feet to 3 make a difference? Either you've got to open up or you just got to carry on. So I just want to
They'll
quickly
say they're finding new information.
listen to this quickly. This is an Indian news broadcast. I'm not sure what the channel is, but you can take a look here.
Beginning of 2021, the South African doctors and people were bracing for the worst as a new coronavirus strain was wreaking havoc across the country. In fact, every 1 in 3 tests were coming out to be positive. But now the number of active cases in South Africa has dropped by 90% in merely 3 months. If you look at the new infections graph and break down the numbers for you, since mid-January, the cases have dropped to 22,000 in 1 day to around 1,000. Now, this drop is not attributed to any vaccination program. The cause of the decline remains unclear. It is a mystery. Now, there was no government-imposed strict lockdown. Apart from a national mask mandate that has been in place, there hasn't even been a vaccination program. So how exactly did the numbers come down to this extent? The researchers do not know the actual toll of the virus on the population. Limited testing capacities and asymptomatic infections have led to no definitive data on how many people have recovered from COVID.
So what I like about reports like this is from WION in India is that they seem to have a more objective take on what's going on here than we do. You know, here it's dropped down by 90%. So it's time for us to just get on with it. We can't afford another lockdown. We can't even afford this rumor that's going around of a third wave, because even that'll put panic into the economy. So I think we got to take a leaf out of these guys' book and maybe watch some more international news rather than just take what our news networks are saying. That's worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. While we're talking about paying attention, let's go to Sean Sanders. It is time to catch up with him again. And it's good to hear about what's going on in the world of crypto. To fill us in on all of that is Sean Sanders, the co-founder of Revix. We're going to talk about Tesla, who are again making news about their purchase of Bitcoin and the fact that you can buy Teslas with Bitcoin, and the fact that NFTs are the big news. So without messing around, here he is. Sean Sanders. How are you doing, Sean?
Morning, Gareth. Morning, team. I'm great. It's been a good week. I say that every week, right? Nothing's changed. It's been a good week in crypto. You have seen a bit of a pullback in prices. Bitcoin's sitting at about $52,600. Last week when we spoke, it was around $56,000. So I've got a whole bunch of my friends messaging me saying now is the time to get in. And it's the same thing I said like 6 months ago, 12 months ago. I'm like, yes, like just dollar cost average into this market. Have, as you've said before, have sort of a dog in the fight. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting that happened this last week, and this was yesterday morning, is that Tesla said that they are now accepting Bitcoin as a means of payment. So why is this a big deal? Because remember, you don't just go out and buy a car, right? You buy a car, and then in Tesla's case, you have to recharge that car regularly. You have to buy components and parts for that car. You have to sometimes upgrade your software. And it's all these sort of, smaller payments as well that'll occur over the lifetime that you have with Tesla that really create value for Bitcoin. Why? Because you're engaging with the network. And, it takes something like Tesla to then bring somebody else on board. And it really is just a case of, a bunch of directors sitting inside a boardroom, and the one turns to the other and goes like, maybe this Bitcoin thing is actually real. And all of a sudden something gets implemented. I know it sounds really, far-fetched in the future, I suppose, to think that we will be using Bitcoin for regular payments. But we are at a position right now where, you're looking at Bitcoin sitting at about, 12 to 13% the total market cap of gold. So, when it's sitting at 20 or 30% or 40 or 50%, when will people, I think, supposedly come around to say, okay, we understand what's happening here, which is quite interesting.
I know that this probably affects such a tiny proportion of people in terms of number of people who'll actually be buying a Tesla with Bitcoin. It's maybe, a handful. But of course, what you're saying is absolutely right, that it's about what this symbolizes and how this might change the way that we do all kinds of transactions going forward. It's a big story because it's Tesla and because we're interested in Bitcoin. But this normally wouldn't register as a story for ordinary people in the world, mostly because none of us have enough Bitcoin to buy a Tesla.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, it costs 0.82 Bitcoin at the moment. So less than one whole Bitcoin to buy the Model 3. That's the entry-level Tesla. which is quite remarkable. I mean, it's kind of like if you had held on to Bitcoin, you could land up buying like, your first Tesla. It's just a bit crazy. Just how things have changed over time. But what's quite interesting is Tesla actually came out and said that they expect 5 to 10% of all new Teslas to be purchased through Bitcoin. And I thought that was very high. So, I mean, interesting stat on that front.
Sean, what are NFTs, these non-fungible tokens, and why are people talking about being, turning memes and original tweets into investment opportunities? What is this stuff? Is it related to cryptocurrencies?
Very much so. So it's related to, I mean, yes, it is definitely related. The entire sector is sort of related to cryptocurrency. But, again, what do we have in common with NFTs? What does crypto have in common with NFTs? And that's use of an underlying blockchain structure. So NFTs, non-fungible tokens. The scariest part about them is their name. For some reason, we decided to choose something that's really ridiculous. But really, in a nutshell, what NFTs are digital representations of something, right? So you could say, okay, I want to have a non-fungible token, which is a unique token. There's no two tokens that are the same, that represents legal ownership of a virtual piece of art. Now, again, anybody that I suppose is over, even 20 is probably going to go, digital art, what are you talking about? But I mean, just 2 weeks ago, Sotheby's auctioned off the fourth most expensive artwork in history. That was a digital art piece that was created by Beeple. Beeple is, and this landed up being the fourth most valuable auction out of anyone that's ever been live, which is again just remarkable sort of development in the NFT space. So this is sort of like DeFi. And we spoke about decentralized finance, I don't know, about 6 or 12 months ago initially, and that sort of blew up and it's grown really quickly. And I mean, DeFi is still expanding and there's a lot going on in that space. This non-fungible token market is very much the same. It's growing rapidly. It's still a little difficult to get involved with. And I think that's really where we're coming in and we're saying, well, non-fungible tokens, right? You can go out and you can buy a digital token that represents the legal ownership of digital art. But if you think about, let's say, your house, you could take your house and that land registry and essentially have that as a token that can be sitting on an Ethereum blockchain. And this is, what's happening in Malta. It's happening in a whole bunch of other countries as well. And what that means is that when you sell that house, and I mean, Malta's, they've got a pretty good regulatory environment. But if you're looking at maybe some Northern African countries, perhaps even South Africa at a future date, it would be really nice to have a blockchain-based repository of exactly who owns what. And that means when you actually buy or sell a house, that is then able to be transferred over the blockchain. Think about your car as well, right? And you can create this as a non-fungible token as well. So when you go buy your BMW, right? This is your unique BMW. It's got your unique VIN number. That means when you go and have a service, and that could be that first service, the 10,000 kilometer service, you name it, whichever services you go for, that can actually be recorded through your token on the blockchain. And that means when somebody purchases the car, it's not looking at a little book saying, oh, look at this person. He's gone ahead and, actually filled in all the dates and, he's gone to have all the services when they were needed. You can actually see that this has occurred, right? So based on near frequency devices, based on just technological advances, you can actually see that this has happened. So the use cases with this, go well beyond just digital artwork. But I think the starting point is, in this digital art world, and it's expanding now. And with Revix, what we've decided to do is, we would love to launch an NFT bundle. So this is something we're looking at doing over the next few months. But right now, if you go ahead and invest in our smart contract bundle, you can get exposure to the cryptocurrencies that are essentially providing the blockchain infrastructure for these NFTs to operate. And if you think about it, and I'm nearly done with my monologue here, but if you think about it, right now you've got a couple people, when I say a couple, you're looking at a few million people that are buying and selling digital artworks, that are going to be trading classic cars and the ownership right to a classic car, right? You don't go and buy and sell that Porsche. You actually sell the right, or you buy the right to then own that Porsche, right? And that people are engaging with this now. But if you think about maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, all of a sudden the millions of transactions that are occurring every day turn into billions. And that's really the big opportunity here. And how do you support that network? You need essentially the blockchain infrastructure, the likes of Ethereum, EOS, Cardano, Tron, that are going to provide a means to verify that transactions have occurred. So hopefully there wasn't too much jargon and whatnot in that, because the crypto world is weird. But in a nutshell, that's NFTs.
I suppose it's difficult for most of us to understand this, but if you think about the way that we transfer ownership, the way that we register our ownership of things, particularly fixed property, it's very antiquated and it needs an update. And it needs to be connected to some kind of registry that can't be messed with. I mean, we know in South Africa that often, people will go to the government deeds office or whatever, and they'll try to find who owns a certain piece of property, and it'll hit a blank wall because you just don't know who that is. Maybe that piece of paper got lost, or the deeds office flooded, or there was a fire or something. This is a way to store that information in perpetuity and in a way that no one can mess with it. No one can go in and alter the file without everybody else on the blockchain knowing about it. So that's useful. And I suppose maybe that's the way that we'll deal with property in every possible iteration going forward.
Yeah, I think that's the big opportunity here, right? Because all of a sudden you look at share trading. So every time you buy and sell stocks, right, you're actually buying a small stake in a company. And right now, the JSE pays you in South Africa, and obviously there's New York Stock Exchange and all the rest. They charge you a pretty hefty fee to be able to say, we can verify that you're the owner that's making the sale, and we can verify that you're the new buyer. In the future, when that's automated and that's on a decentralized sort of database that is a blockchain, that's where things get interesting, because all of a sudden the transaction fees get significantly lowered, right? And that's the big opportunity here going forward.
So I love the fact that you can get some exposure if you go onto the smart payments platform. But Lenice wants to know a very specific thing here. She says, I'm living in Belgium. I'm still a South African citizen. Can I, from my South African account, get a Revix profile even if I don't reside in SA?
Yes. So if you're a South African citizen living abroad, as there seems to be actually, Gareth, you've got a lot of international listeners. So hello to everyone that's international out there, especially expats that have sort of left South Africa. But if you're wanting to invest in Revix or invest with us, you can go and you can sign up for an account. You can use your international address. Just reach out to our customer support team. They can guide you through that process as well. It depends sort of where your primary residence is. Again, reach out to us. We generally get back to customers within 5 to 10 minutes through our live chat function on the website. And I think that's a big factor as well, by the way, just deviating a little bit, of course.
I thought you were going to say 5 to 10 days, and then you said minutes. And I was like, whoa, imagine if we could do that with Home Affairs.
Well, that's the opportunity, right? I mean, I have to tell you a funny story, actually. So the other day, Gareth, Alex Schmid, right? So Gareth's a good friend, a mutual friend of ours. He's starting another business. He'll probably be actually on the show pretty soon. He's launching something really cool. He interviewed somebody to kind of, rent their new apartment that they have in Greenpoint. And that person was from another exchange in South Africa. I'm not going to name the exchange. But he mentioned, he was like, hey, my very good friend Sean, has launched Revix. They're doing some pretty cool things. And they're very similar to you, in terms of what you guys do. So she burst out laughing, being like, oh, Revix is a lot smaller. We are across 25 countries. We have X number billion, whatever customers, whatever. And he was like, okay, that feels kind of rude. And I sat back and I was like, damn right, you're big. And you're big like Standard Bank, FNB, all these other big players that exist out there. But you've lost touch with your customers. So when somebody messages Revix, right, we get back to you in 5 to 10 minutes, worst case scenario, 12 hours later. And that's the sort of really bespoke opportunity that we have in this market, because you go message other crypto exchanges. And I think that's actually the best sales pitch that I can have on the show. Go to another crypto exchange in South Africa, go message their customer support and wait for how long that they take to get back to you. Because if you've ever sat in a bank and you've sat there waiting for your, somebody to come and service you, 3 hours later pass, you understand why customer support is so damn valuable, right? And with Revix, again, you can reach out to us and test us on this. Go ahead and message us on the platform.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. You've given us non-fungible tokens to chew on for another week, and we will check in with you ASAP. But it's good to get these updates, and thanks for trying to educate us in new vocabulary and keeping us on the real leading edge of where crypto is going. Sean Sanders, Revix. You can find out more by going to Facebook at Revix Invest. They're also on Instagram at Revix Invest and Twitter the same. You can follow them on any of those.
Going, Sean.
Just go and register now. Go and start an account, even if you're
fantastic,
international.
Guys.
And speak to them, because their customer service people get back to you in 5 to 10 minutes. That's fantastic. Coming up, the burning platform. This is where we get to dismantle and analyze some of the things that have been happening in the week. And we're going to be joined by Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko. And we'll find out all about what the big events of the week mean for you, for me, and for everyone else in South Africa. And also take a look internationally at what's going on. We're going to find out all about that. And by the way, Nthabiseng Moleko is a senior lecturer in managerial economics at Stellenbosch University's Business School. And we will have all the latest updates for you in the next hour. Right, Pums?
I'm very excited about this one.
No. Well, there's
Economics.
never a dull week. Not
Money,
on this
money, money,
platform. There's always
money.
stuff to talk about. And we will
Yeah.
get into all of that, dig deep.
Oh dear, stuck again.
Oh no. No. He'll come on up and buffer.
Oh, but I wanted,
Think
somebody
that there
sent
may
us
be
a
something
message
going
that
on with our internet. There we are. Pums, you're back. All right. When we come back, we will have the burning platform. That's next. cliffcentral.com.
Do you grunt when getting out of the car? Creak when getting out of bed? Do you walk into a room and forget why? Are you having trouble in the sack? Is the hump in a slump? Join me, Chris Haven-Smith, and Dr. Mark on the T-Health Show every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. where we talk to medical and allied professionals about those serious and not so serious medical lifestyle issues. The T-Health Show, sponsored by the T-Clinic. The T-Health Show is available on podcasts. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Just because it's about technology, connecting your business to the rest of the world doesn't mean you need to send rockets to space and use complicated solutions. Want to simplicate things? Well, join Jaco Voigt, who is the CEO of Catalytic, on the Unbundled podcast. With skin in the game and a keen focus on educating and assisting you and your business, Jaco decodes all the aspects of connectivity, security, and cloud solutions. Unbundled is brought to you by Catalytic and is available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
After the year you've had, we know all you want is a great economic quarter. Ijabupilo ka knife and fork with a Nando's quarter chicken and any single side for only 49 Rand. Nando's. Fire it up.
cliffcentral.com on a Thursday morning, the burning platform, which is brought to you by Nando's. There's a lot going on over there.
Dude, there is a lot going on. Kaneko forgot to get me to sign stuff, and so y'all just gonna have to give me 2 minutes, all right? I'm gonna come back just now.
All right.
Intro the guest.
All right, cool. Phumi Mashiko is with us. She will be our main guest this morning, as she always is. She will give us a look at all the important stuff that's going on in the world of current affairs, and we'll have hopefully some analysis which you will enjoy and find useful through the course of the next hour. We also encourage you, if you're watching us for the first time on cliffcentral.com, for you to let us know what you think and to like and subscribe to our various feeds. If you do that, it helps us to keep track of what's going on and for us to keep providing you with the most up-to-date information. So like, subscribe, and little bell. all of that stuff. You know how it goes. All right, so the Burning Platform is brought to you by Nando's. It's your opportunity to catch up on all the important information. And we're going to be joined by our special guest this morning, Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko, who is a senior lecturer in managerial economics at the University of Stellenbosch Business School. That's USB. And we're going to talk a little bit about developmental economics. We'll also talk about what she thinks we need to do as a country to get ahead, which I think is probably the most interesting thing we could discuss this morning. So we'll get to Dr. Nthabiseng in just a minute. Also, if you have any ideas of what you'd like to talk about this morning, we always have a good, solid agenda. But I would like to know what you think and what you'd love us to discuss. So pass that information on as quickly as you can. All right, Phumi's here and Sia is here, and we're just waiting for Dr. Nthabiseng to log on. We have had one or two internet issues this morning. I don't know what's happening. If anybody is aware of maybe it used to always be some kind of cable that was disconnecting somewhere, because I've had great internet for the last 8 weeks, and then suddenly this is happening for the last 2 days. I don't know what's going on. All right, let's start off with the obvious thing. And Phumi and I made a brief reference to this earlier. It's something that Phumi's always on top of. And we were talking about what's going on at the State Capture Commission. So what I saw when Pravin Gordhan and Dalimpofu were arguing on Tuesday night was really two sides of an argument. One is very much against the idea of the state being captured by bad influences, in this case Tom Moyane, and being perverted for the use of bad political actors in order to enrich themselves. And that was certainly what Pravin Gordhan, if you asked him for his opinion, what he probably thinks of the whole state capture arrangement. If you listen to what Dalimpofu had to say, he had a totally different take. He was like, well, we're bad, but you're also bad. And therefore we aren't so bad. Now, a lot of people have commented that this isn't exactly a defense. It's more of an admission of guilt, but then saying, well, our guy might be, captured, but then so are you, Pravin Gordhan, and you're not exactly the best example of a good and pure and decent human being either. So it got very ugly. It got very personal with Dalimpofu and with Pravin Gordhan, and lawyers sides got involved. But I think we're missing the point here, is that this is now about stuff that has already happened. What we've got going on at the moment is probably a little more interesting, because it seems Ace and Cyril are squaring off against each other more and more often in the ANC's NEC, and that's not something we've ignored on the Burning Platform either. Let me welcome to the conversation Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko. It's a great pleasure to see you, Dr. Nthabiseng. It's nice to have you on screen with us this morning. How are things going?
No, I'm very well. Very good morning to everyone who's here. I had a bit of connectivity issues. I had to connect and disconnect, but I'm well. It's good to be up in the morning.
Thank you very much. Tell us a little bit, for those of us who have no idea how this works, what is developmental economics, and what do you guys actually do in that department?
So I love that question, because everyone always asks me, so why is everyone else an economist and you like saying you're a development economist? What does that mean? Yeah. So I always give the simple explanation, Gareth, that mainstream economics is very theoretical on certain neoclassical and monetarist framework. I always used to ask the question at varsity as to, okay, so I was at UCT and we did a course called political economy. That's what changed my whole life. And I began to understand that there are major disparities between rich countries, poor countries, haves and have-nots. And I remember a course I did called International Trade and Bargaining, and I represented a country called Nicaragua. So I never knew this country existed. I had to represent it in a kind of an international setup of what we call the WTO in Trade and Bargaining and Economics 3. I was an economics major, and I saw the disparities. There was like a Chinese block there with 60 delegates out of the entire Ecos 3 class. Then there was the US, which had like the major block, Then there was Africa, which was disjointed, and South, the global South. And then there was this one country called Nicaragua. And I was like, what do you even vote for? Because you are irrelevant. And I was like, so the question that came to my mind is, what then happens when you start talking economics with the aim of helping countries like Nicaragua? You know, South Africa is slightly bigger because we're seen as more relevant in terms of middle income, but lower to middle income to your least developed economies. Why are we not looking at economic theory and economics that talks to improving inequality, improving access, improving outcomes for output, and improving distribution of wealth? The levels of inequality globally right now are shocking, and they're getting worse. So all these things for me talk to how you use economics for furthering these development goals, rather than simply just churning out economists that are not necessarily fundamentally concerned about redistribution and equality. So I'm concerned about those things as well as the economic variables.
Redistribution and equality sound to me like those are. This is a certain kind of theory and ideology rather than a real study of economics, because this obsession worldwide with the Gini coefficient and with economic inequality seems to not have any solutions proposed, but rather to just, hate on people who have more than you. It's like living next door to a billionaire and imagining that affects your life in some way.
I want to change that. It's not an ideology. It's rooted in economic theory. So there's a paper I wrote with Prof. Swilling, and what you've seen over time is a change in the kind of theoretical frameworks that are being used in economics right now. So if you go back in time.
Sorry, I don't mean to be argumentative at the start of our discussion, but that's kind of how.
No, go for it. Be argumentative. I have no issue. I'll explain my points.
When we prioritize the words redistribution or inequality in the preamble discussion, what we're really doing is proposing a political ideology and theory. This is not something new. This goes all the way back to Marx and Engels. No?
So for me, I don't agree with that. I don't want us to get it trapped into politics, right? From an economic perspective, there's what is called heterodox economics. And there's also a change in mainstream economics, primarily moving from economic theory, from your neoclassical theory to your monetarist theory, to where we are now. There's been a lot of discussion from an economic theory perspective to look at what type of economic frameworks and economic modeling do we have, and what are the outcomes? Of course, you have your hardcore, I'd say, ideologically, you wouldn't necessarily say neoclassical economic theory is an ideological position. It's actually a mainstream, and it's accepted as the norm, right? So, anyone who is to a differing view is seen as left-leaning, and it becomes an ideological issue or discussion, which is not necessarily necessary. So it doesn't always have to be that if you have an alternative economic thought process and framework from which you come from, that it leans to an ideological disposition rather than a theoretical one. That's my contention with what your point is.
But if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. And to talk about heterodox versus, the orthodox position is just to say, we're different, but actually this is not terribly different. And surely economics comes down to rands and cents and supply and demand, and all the theory in the world that you guys at universities throw into thesis and master's dissertations and so on. All of that is good and well, but aren't you guys just circling the wagons and not particularly doing anything useful when it comes to this stuff? Because actually,
which stuff? Tell me which stuff you're talking about when you say not doing anything useful. Explain what that point means.
You may be doing the work that the politicians are too stupid to do, but it's basically politics in economics. That's what it is.
Politics,
no? Isn't it?
Economics.
Am I very superficial?
I think it's much broader than that. So we need to look at the underlying economic theory. So you find that some of the issues that you're raising, you're correct to say that we've got to look at the variables, the measurable variables. I think when you talk about supply and demand, these are some of the economic indicators that are usually referred to. But there's a deeper question in that the fundamental basis for most economic discussions is framed in an ideological position. So for an example, if you're talking about South Africa, and if you're talking about the global West, they have maybe a different type of ideological position to some of your South American type of counterparts, to the Chinese. However, that does not mean to say some of the fundamentals are not comparable, the macroeconomic variables are not comparable. It's just that the way in which they decide to plan economically and manage the economy is slightly different and has different outcomes, and they have primarily different goals and visions. And that's critical for us to note. I think that what we've seen, I use the US as an example, how the US as a model economy and the biggest economy globally, even now they remain the biggest economy globally. Since the 40s, post-war World War II, you see that they've really been the mainstream type driving the type of economic policy across the globe. And you see there, from a neoliberal perspective, they had the Keynesian economic framework where they used the government, they used the government fiscus to develop the post-World War economy. They came up with the reconstruction plan for the world, the Marshall Plan that everyone then adopted. They came up with the Bretton Woods institutions, and this was enabling the development of their own economies after the World War. At that time, it was needed because they were completely obliterated. We would know this, of course, and they were shattered. And then we saw a different type of economy rising in the 70s.
All of us would be speaking German if they hadn't. So
exactly. So, and then you saw a kind of a change in the 70s to a neoliberalism. Remember, from the post-40s, the state was quite interventionist. It was very much involved in the reconstruction and development program of most OECD economies. And then you saw now the growth happening. You saw the gains of the Marshall Plan and the investment into public spending, and you saw monetary policy taking the fore, where budgeting was taken.
New Deal was obviously all of that as well.
Yeah, so this is where we would probably reference the debt to GDP and the focus around and that. But this was in the 70s, so it's all about phasing. And then you saw the financialization in the 80s and the 90s of most global economies, the East Asians coming to the fore, and you saw the crash of the Asian crises and what the world did. This is back in the 90s, and then we saw again in 2009 the financial recession, and again the state then intervened to drive economic development. So you saw that there were times in the economy where there were different type of economic theory that were at the fore, but you saw the development of economic theory to develop economies.
I mean, I don't want you and I to give everybody a history lesson. You're obviously much more well-versed in this stuff than I could ever be, but I think it's important to have that as a background. My point is...
But it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, listen, cavemen, Nthabiseng, cavemen used to trade. They knew that one goat was worth 10 pieces of wood, and they didn't need any ideology or theory to back that up. And I think most human
No, but you took me there, Gareth. You took me to the ideological point. You're the one who started with ideology. So I'm going there. You can take me where you want. I'll keep quiet on the history. Take me where you want. I'm going.
Here's where I really think that people like you at universities in South Africa can do us an enormous service, because you can help us to understand things that require research, development, discussion, expansion, where we need to think of applying new ways of considering economic theory to our current situation, because we're in a hole. So I want to know from you, first of all, what do you make of the current situation in South Africa's economy? How do you analyze and understand that? How can you explain it to street people like me? And second of all, what do you think we can start doing immediately to rectify the obviously not good situation that we're in?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think the real analysis, I would have to be very blunt and frank. I've done quite a few discussions, and I think where I've said that the current status of the economy, number one, is not as a result of COVID. I think that's number one. COVID is one of the reasons why we are where we are. It has worsened the situation currently, but it hasn't been the reason for where we are. Where South Africa is that more than 50% of South Africans are in poverty. Where South Africa is we're leading with inequality globally in the world. So that means redistribution isn't happening. So you're finding that the bottom 40% earn 8.3% of our wealth and income in South Africa. And you're finding that the top 10% of South Africa's population, and there's a racial disparity as well. It's largely the white population in that top 10% is owning 90% of the wealth. So where South Africa is where we're sitting with 42.6% unemployment levels broadly. I like to use discouraged, more than 3 million discouraged work seekers not included. Where South Africa is, we contracting when we look at our industrial contribution or manufacturing value add as a proportion of GDP. And so the resulting outcome of this is that you're seeing a contracting ability of companies and the economy to really employ our people. That's why we're seeing that the employment intensity is so low in South Africa, is that we've had what we call a services-led growth path. So if you look at various variables, just around context, if you look at now high-level market cap, we'd say banking, financial sector is doing very well. If you look at the variables on market cap, agglomeration of industries, contribution of that sector to GDP. However, if you look at how it's unfolding into productive investments, a lot of it is driven by speculative inflows. A lot of it is not necessarily going into productive investments, which is what is desperately needed in this country, so that you can actually start to produce and have more capacity coming from both your industry and your agriculture. Contribution coming from agriculture is at 1% in South Africa. Some provinces are slightly higher. It's argued that because of the multiply effect, i.e. employment, i.e. buying from other subsectors and contributing, it can be as up to 10%. But it really is very low given the level of unemployment we have and given the land and the natural resources that South Africa has. Including mining, the contribution is less than 5% and it's dropped from the 50s or 60s to the level we see it now. Gross fixed capital formation is a variable that people rarely talk to. And that talks to the level of investment or reinvestment into capital, land, machinery, equipment, into the real economy. And we're seeing, as a proportion of GDP, that's really been going downward as a proportion of GDP. You compare it to other countries, China, Turkey, countries that are similar to South Africa as emerging markets, and we're really at the bottom of that rank. If you look at other variables, not just GFCF, but you look at investment, we've been unable to really attract capital inflows in the form of investment FDI into South Africa. And that speaks to, despite the policies we've had over time, we've been unable to really make sure that that really yields investment inflows. And that speaks to probably that we're not doing sufficient work in terms of translating our economic policies to real deliverables. The one other variable that I want to focus on, probably that is very, very important for optimizing our output, is, besides looking at government debt, which everyone has very well knowledge of because that's all we talk about, debt to GDP. We in South Africa are not talking sufficiently about how to make sure that our economic growth is driven by redistribution. Right.
Okay.
So
just explain to me, what do you mean by redistribution? What does that
I'll
actually
explain.
mean?
I'll explain. So let me start with the economic growth. So usually in countries, how you measure economic growth, just to unpack it, growth is measured by 4 indices. In South Africa, you have consumption, where you and I, households, businesses, the government, they consume goods and services and they contribute to output, economic output. You and I offer our services, our labor and all those type of things to produce these services, and they translated into output. Okay, that's one. Then the second is investment coming in from both your global and your domestic partners, investing into companies, investing in the stock exchange, but also investing into productive investment like manufacturing, literally buying land. Mm-hmm. If Amazon comes, they buy land, they need a site, they need a warehouse to put things, they need people and so forth. So that's investment, and that's why FDI is good. Then you also have got to look at your, what we'd call your net exports. That deals with trade. So how much are you trading? Are you sending more out than you're sending in, right? Are you able to produce goods and sell them and gain the benefits of what we call competitive advantage? And so that talks to your trade. And the last is the government expenditure. They also contribute to this growth. Now, where the redistribution happens is on the part of household income. How much of your population have what level of income decile? In South Africa, if you look at that consumption number, we know that the biggest concentration is biracial, and also we know that the middle income is debt-driven. SARB does a lot of research on how household debt to income levels are. So our people's growth in terms of consumption is not driven by growth in manufacturing or productivity or SMMEs. It's driven by consumption underpinned by debt.
Right.
That's a problem. So if you want redistribution, you've got to have more of your people going into the middle income, to simply put it.
Right.
You have to have more of your people going to middle income. You've got to see more of your people having high income level, right? More Black South Africans specifically because of the racial disparities with income inequality.
But South Africa,
we can go into the detail there, but I think that just to answer you on that.
Been tremendously successful in adding to the Black middle class over the last 20 years. It's been probably some of the fastest growth in any demographic in the world in respect to that. So, I mean, that's an impressive thing that we should take stock of. We are moving in the right direction. I mean, you know, when we talk about redistribution, I do get a little nervous because, you know, there have been people in the past, Mao's Great Leap Forward, or, you know, Hitler's idea of the night where you go and take all the Jews' shops and you destroy their possessions. And
no, that's not what redistribution
means.
When economic theorists talk like this, they talk about it like it's just a thing that happens and it's on paper. But in real life, these things happen a little more.
But Gareth, he's stuck. He's having a lot of technical issues, internet issues. But Gareth, what it also must be taken into account is the fact that we come from a very low base in South Africa. So we obviously had quite a high growth, and that's what emerging markets are about. Am I right? Because we come from zero, and so to have a high growth at the
Yeah, I like this point that Gareth makes, Puti, on the issue of redistribution and the middle income or the middle class. So what is interesting about the Black middle class is that, what is Black middle class South Africa? And I found this interesting. There's research done by the UCT. I forgot the marketing unit there, but I just remember off the top of my head, they talk about people owning a microwave, a dishwasher. It's like, that's what it means to, I want to break it down. That's what it means when we're talking about the middle class. What other countries talk about when they talk middle class is asset ownership. Singapore was very clear that what redistribution meant, because they have a similar type of history to South Africa from a racial perspective, was that they had to make sure that the majority who were not necessarily able to access assets were able to also participate in the redistribution of assets in the long term and own assets. So I think one of the things we need to look for, beyond owning things that have no value in terms of long-term growth and acquisition of debt when you have no assets, capital, land, and labor we all have, but without assets, you cannot accrue rental, you cannot accrue income on those things. You simply paid a wage. So I think it's important for us to differentiate between what is meant by South Africa's Black middle class. So one can be happy, one can say we've done a lot, but the problem, what you find with the Black middle income is that they are salary away from poverty. Because they don't have investments, they don't have investments, they don't have assets, they don't have wealth in the sense of they don't have inheritance or trust. So if they don't get that salary and they are dispensed because of loss of that wage or income.
That's the case for probably most South Africans. I mean, I don't think there are that many wealthy people in this country, even if we took away everything that the very, very wealthy in South Africa had and we redistributed it, it wouldn't necessarily raise the baseline for the majority of us. I mean, most people are about one salary away from being in poverty in South Africa, particularly in our current economic conditions and post-COVID. So how do we fix this in practical terms? Is it a policy issue from government? Is it something that we can do to start stimulating the economy outside of government? Because everybody keeps telling us that, you know, it's the SMMEs, but this is not the most favorable environment. And you as an economist would be able to explain why. For SMMEs. That's why a lot of brilliant people are rather taking their ideas and frankly their capital out of the country to places where it can grow faster.
So I think there's a lot of points that you've raised. Let me start with the last one. What can we do to get out of this, right? I think that, is it policy? I think that policy does definitely play an important role. What South Africans, you'd hear in a lot of the discourse that's happening right now is that a lot of people will say, there's policy fatigue, we're tired of coming up with new plans, let's implement. The problem is, if you look historically at South Africa's economic policies, and I'll give you some of the facts in that we first had what we call the RDP, right? The RDP, if you look at it from an average growth rate perspective, looking at South Africa's economic growth over time, we were able to see an average growth of around, I think it's around 3.2% with the RDP. That was the first economic policy South Africa had. That led to redistribution and some of the economic growth gains we saw right after post-democracy. But then we moved to what we call the Askisa or the GIPSA. What happened there was that the outcomes, and I want to focus on the outcomes of the economic policy, they then had improved outcomes, and this was towards late 90s, 2004, 5, 6. That's where you had the best growth in South Africa, 5.6%. But also you saw more people being employed, and unemployment was at its lowest then. I think unemployment was around 22% then, and this is the narrow definition. The broad definition was still over 30%. But this is the best unemployment South Africa has had, which is an anomaly because most countries have crisis unemployment when it starts to peak over 10%. We have double that and we are okay with that. But then we moved to worsening economic output with the new growth path, particularly with the NDP. So what you see with the economic policy outcomes, where people, I want to start with the policy because it's very critical we understand that if we continue with these economic policies, they have been implemented, maybe not to 100 or optimal levels, but the economic management of the country has been running with economic policies in place, and the outcomes haven't yielded good outcomes, whether it's from growth, whether it's from unemployment perspective, inequality. So policy is something that we need to focus on, and policy improvement, I will take it to say, how do we change the structure of the South African economy? You spoke about SMMEs. What I would say is the key recommendation, and I always talk about how we need to enhance what I call economic productivity. So two things. We've got to look at how we make sure that we've got manufacturing as a value add, increasing as an output. That'll help SMMEs, that'll help all the value chain, that'll help all the municipalities that are not collecting rates because people are not working. There's no economic activity. People are reliant on government, particularly in these nodes where there were no economic substructures set up or economic infrastructure in the former Bantustan. So you've got to look at new ways to boost economic activity, right? So investing in productive investment and investing in manufacturing as a value add. So that talks to agricultural processing. Simplified is like the things that we eat in our house, in our homes. Who's making it? We import most of those goods, right? We import the things you eat. If you woke up and you had coffee, did any of that come from South Africa? It's probably imported. If any of you woke up had tea, maybe the rooibos is made here, but the milk, not the milk, but the other non-agricultural food stuff that is not perishable is likely to have been imported. So this is where you've got to focus on. And this is where most countries that started to change their economic structures focused on, is changing the contribution of manufacturing value add as a proportion. So that's my first recommendation.
Surely the first recommendation, and I know Phumi feels strongly about this too because she's also a small business owner. Pums, you and I both agree that the first thing we need is less government in the economy, not more. We want to have less people interfering in our businesses so that we can get by with less regulation. I mean, poor Phumi has been waiting for months now to try and get phone lines put in and to try and get all the red tape around her registration of her new office and all that kind of thing sorted out. And this is all, I mean, in the case of the service provider for internet, that's a separate one. Obviously, that's a private company. But so much of this stuff, it's hard to start a business if you have a good idea and you live in a township. There is regulation, there is red tape, there is confusion, there is bureaucracy around being able to do all of the stuff that you've got to do. When all you want to do, to go back to my example, is trade 10, pieces of wood for one goat. And we don't need a Minister of Finance or SARS or the economic cluster involved in our lives to do that. In fact, the less they have to do with it, the better.
You don't like the Minister of Finance.
No, I don't mind him at all. I actually have no problem with it. I think governments in general are the worst way to run anything without adding huge costs to that transaction. In fact, what you and I and Nthabiseng can do is we can trade together, and it shouldn't have anything to do with government.
So here's the thing. The thing is that in an ideal world, most people think that government intervention is what I call interference. I think this is what I'm hearing from you.
I would argue in this country, particularly it is, because we know that there's graft and there's huge collusion between big business and government. We know that tender irregularity is a massive part of that. In fact, we've got the State Capture Commission going on at the moment, investigating just how in cahoots big business and government have been over the years.
So I want to take us back a little bit. So the first point that you made was on the government role in economics and economic policy, that they should not necessarily be involved. So what I would say is that the state, in terms of how it intervenes, is critical. And I think for me, that's what we need to focus on. The state should be, we talk about the state creating an enabling environment, but the question is for who? So the state economic policy right now has created an enabling environment for multinationals. So that's why the SMME will be highly hamstrung.
They've been playing an enabling role in helping their friends score tenders and make millions in cars.
No, you don't. You're talking something different. I'm talking economic policy. So I'm talking economic policy in terms of what they've been doing.
What multinationals have been investing en masse in the last 5 years? None.
I wouldn't say none, but how you measure it is as a proportion of GDP. So you can say that it's actually been declining. So also you can look at the investment levels that the president has mentioned.
I mean, that's not an argument then.
No, I'm not
Gareth,
hold
on.
I'm not saying it's going up. So I'm saying that there is a problem with the level of investment. So I'm agreeing with you. I can't say none because there are, like for an example, Standard Bank, the Chinese have invested. We've seen, what's the Walmart? I'm not sure, the American company, the one that bought into the retail group. That's an example of investment. Is it Walmart? Yeah. So there's other examples, similar examples where you're seeing investment, but it's not necessarily sufficient to deal with some of the structural problems South Africa has. So what you are referring to about the red tape, the easing of business, this is critical, right? We don't want SMMEs to be struggling because they must go register and it takes 30 days with SARS to get a clearance on something. We don't want SMMEs to be struggling to get a phone line. By the way, phone lines are not managed by government, it's managed by Telkom, but I'm not sure exactly which phone line is managed by government. But there's some of these service providers that are actually not necessarily government, but the issues of regulation, right? If you have to comply, if you're in a mining sector, you need a paper by some authority to give you a health inspection, but they take 6 weeks to give you that. It hinders the ability of government to actually enable you. So from the perspective of efficiency and the capacity of the state, the Department of Labor, the departments that enable companies and also your SMMEs to get what they need from a regulatory perspective, the state isn't doing well. No one can defend this, particularly in many of the subsectors where people are crying for authorization, for response rates, for some of the regulatory improvements. So there's a lot of, this is what we call microeconomic reform. Microeconomic reform lessens your hindering, what we call stumbling blocks or inhibitors to entering into sectors. I mean, there's a lot of applications for some subsectors. If it's going to take the government official in a mineral and energy 10 weeks, 20, a month, 2 months to get back to you, just an email, that's inefficient, right? It costs you money. It costs you inability. You might lose a business deal and so forth because of the time. So you are spot on there. Microeconomic reforms of making sure the cost of doing business is reduced is very critical. But I think the role of the state, I want to take us back. The state has intervened globally to save nations' economies, to help SMMEs, to make sure that the inequality and the severity of underdevelopment is dealt with. So the question is the state able to do that efficiently? If not, fix that. But the state has always had a role. The state has a role in the first world economies. If you look at agriculture in Europe, if you look at the example that's usually made is that a cow, it's almost like 70% of the cow is fed by subsidies, right? And then they export the rest of that. In agriculture is used as an example to say how much the state is intervening in agriculture and agricultural processing in Europe is massive, but they're able then to reduce their cost and compete with everyone else because the state is subsidizing, the Europeans. So it's not the same in Africa because we don't have that budget, right? So you have to compete now with them and they have subsidies. We don't have that budget.
I think that the thing about it though, Nthabiseng, is not so much that there is a failing of policy, but there is a failing of interconnectedness. So our government tends to work in silos, right? So the economic policy might be sound in some sectors of it, but where the Department of Labor and all of the enabling factors, or even education. I mean, when I looked at some of the stuff that you wanted to talk about today, and I hope we get to that as well. You talk about kind of we have to invest more in productive parts of the economy. But the education sector is what lets us down then, because you need a particular level of skills and types of skills that we currently don't have. We don't have those skills, because we have not concentrated on those skills. I saw a couple of days ago a VC at one of the universities talking about the number of PhDs Africa needs to produce. And I'm kind of going, yeah, but we also, PhDs are a particular type of skill set, and the kinds of things we need now is more doers and not more thinkers. So, and that's why I'm saying, we don't have, the circle doesn't work well with each other.
Puti, we need, this thing you're talking about is coordination. So any economy, what they do, they produce the people that is needed to make whatever your strategy is happen. So you've got to, for an example, if you're saying you're industrializing, if you're saying you want to create more productive sectors in the economy, if you're saying you want to empower SMMEs and you want to produce more things instead of importing, simple thing, you've got to have artisans. You've got to have carpenters. You've got to have people that build. You've got to have bricklayers. These are people that are coming out of Tibet
sounds
College.
A lot like central planning.
Central planning is not necessarily. No, coordination and central planning are two different things. But your planning has got to work in sync. You can't have Department of Labor and Department of Employment and Labor not speaking, and education, not speaking to the economic growth target and economic goals of the country. Those two should be working in synergy. So the labor market construct, which is really what we have in South Africa, is that the outcome on the labor market is not, we have a mismatch of the skills produced and the demand. Right now, we need more people that use their hands. We need and are desperate need of plumbers, as an example. ESCOM in terms of, you look at the skills, electricians, engineers. We are importing those skills. We don't have enough in South Africa. We used to, because the technical space was very strong, i.e. technical, what they used to call universities of, they've now called them as University of Technology, Technicons. The Tibet colleges, before they were Tibet colleges, were FET colleges, but even before, they used to send tradesmen and people to do trades tests at different places where they produce boilermakers, artisans, carpenters. It used to be a skill where people can develop families, grow themselves, have their own enterprises, but we look down on those things now, and we don't focus on them to grow our economy. So Puti is spot on.
The closure of those technical colleges is another example, I would say, of government interfering in the wrong way rather than the right way by leaving people alone. If they'd left those colleges to operate, we'd probably be producing those skilled people right now.
I agree with you, Gareth, there. I can't fight you there. That one I completely concur, to say that if we are really on an industrialization path, we've got, well, now they're talking about reinvigorating the teacher training colleges, reinvigorating the Tibet colleges, but it's going to take a while to now redo that. But it's critical that we do it, because we can't keep having this mismatch where we're churning out people into the economy. Remember what's happening every year: 1 million plus people enter the labor market, having left the schooling or post-schooling phase. Of those, 6% go to Tibet colleges, right? 7% go to universities. The question is, what happens to the rest?
Well,
they go unemployed.
This is a great place for us to bring in the discussion around something which is fermenting across the country and does every year at this time, and that is university politics. And unfortunately, we have so many people in South Africa who are desperate. I interviewed Mcebo Dlamini yesterday on my TV show, and he explained to me, when he was heading up Fees Must Fall in 2015 and 16, what their purpose was then, and how many South Africans, particularly young Black South Africans, see university as the only way out of poverty. And we have a problem because we have a lack of capacity at our universities in order to enroll all these people. We also aren't necessarily producing those skills that Phumi was talking about earlier, and we don't have as much money as we need in many of these places to be able to finance this. Now, last week, interestingly enough, I had Frans Cronje from the IRR on, and he explained that we actually do have enough money. It wouldn't cost us that much to make tertiary education free. And he says that would really help a lot of people to enter the middle class we started talking about earlier. What do you guys see, Pums and Nthabiseng, what do you see as the solution to the current crisis in education? And this is where government does have a very big role. We know that, government subsidizes just about everyone who goes to university. And in many cases, thanks to NSFAS, is able to pay for a few of them in totality. But there are still gaps that need filling. So what do you think of that?
Nthabi, you go first.
Okay, so I think that I concur with, I don't know who the speaker was that came in to say that, is there enough? Yeah, there's definitely sufficient. I think the question that is very much important for optimizing education outcomes in South Africa is that we've got to agree and accept the fundamental principle is that poverty is lessened by significant levels if our people are educated. I think that poverty report, I can churn some numbers. They cite that poverty is reduced. Literally, I think those in poverty usually have very low level of education. I think it's over 50%, those who have not finished their post-matric qualification. Those who have finished post-matric qualification and have a university or equivalent have less than 10%. It's a single digit. It's a single digit level of poverty. So you find it's around 8 or 9%, but it more than goes over 60% where you have less than a post-matric qualification. So that talks to exactly what you're saying, that if you do not educate our people, why is education important? It enables you to translate output, or it enables you to take factors of production and translate them to output. Someone who has gone to school is able to say, okay, maybe I don't have a job now, but what can I do in the interim? Or I can have an idea and translate that idea into some kind of innovation. So I think, number one, you're spot on that we definitely need to finance education. There is sufficient budget for that. I think the issue is that, is there a will? So what's happening right now in the country is austerity. We're seeing a reduction across the board of over 600 billion in terms of the budget cuts that we're speaking about since 3 years ago, but I think more so from the medium-term budget policy statement in October, but also now in the February statement, we're seeing austerity. There's what is called reprioritization. So instead of increasing money to public expenditure, we're seeing a reduction, particularly across your, they call it learning outcomes, your health, your education, your social expenditure is being drastically reduced. Why? So that the budget surplus can be met in the next 3 to 5 years, right? So this is part and parcel of why the state is cutting expenditure drastically. And there's a lot of opposition to this, because in a time of recession, a time of crises, what you want to do is pump money into the economy to kickstart getting out of a recession quicker, but also to kickstart economic activity, because all the other subsectors I spoke about earlier, CIG or CINX, are contracting, and the only way to stimulate economic activity is through the government fiscus. That is a temporary measure, though, and it's not a long-term measure. So there's a lot of discussion around this and a lot of argument. But for now, economic policy that the government has chosen is to cut. They haven't chosen to look at how to grow.
Some of us
that's a
problem.
Although, but what we're also seeing, I think that that is simply a result of the fact that there's no more thinking happening in our government. I think that they have their backs against the wall. They have too many fires to fight, and so there's no more creative solutions kind of driven thinking.
So they must call us. There are people with ideas. There are people who are still
there
saying,
are many people with ideas.
Let's do this. Let's approach it this way. We've written a paper. This paper that I refer to is called New Wine into New Wine Skin, an alternative economic strategy for this reconstruction of South Africa's economy. I wrote this with Prof. Swilling, and there were other economists, young economists, that were part of the workshops that we had and that participated in this process. We are clear to say there are things. Gareth asked a critical question: what should be done, right? There are several initiatives that you can do immediately, long-term, short-term. But there are things that can be done immediately to change the growth path of South Africa. There are people who have done research who are still looking at ways to intervene. But I do want to encourage us to say it's not all doom and gloom. I do have hope.
I have plenty of hope. Tell me, I have plenty of hope. This is one of the things, and I love the fact that you're saying there are people out there who have the thinking, who want to implement it. And this is exactly my point, is that unfortunately, the people in our governing system right now have so many Yeah, they have so many fires to fight. And, you know, you spoke about Asgisa earlier, right? So Joel Nechitenze, who was one of the critical members of welding that policy in place.
He's a policy machine.
He is, and we love him for that, right? He was able to, for a very long time, drive a lot of the policies that were coming out of our government. But now he's writing open letters in the Daily Maverick complaining about the RET.
Well,
this is what I'm saying. Y'all, they're not working no more. They're not working no more.
This is a very good indication. Golden Echitenze, since you brought him up, is a perfect example of precisely my point, that all we've got left in government now are a bunch of grifters. And unfortunately, you could talk about all of this in theoretical terms, and it's very convenient for you guys at the universities to do this, because government can't be the arsonist. Government can't be the arsonist and the firefighter. Nthabiseng.
Ntabi, I'm gonna phone you.
Listen, Gareth Putti, I agree that we've got to improve the capacity of the state. I will say that. We've got to make it more efficient. We've got to put performance management systems in place. We've got to hold the performance agreements of ministers. The president must hold ministers to account. We've got to do all those things. And it's the political will. It is a political will.
It is a political will
that's required for that.
I like that our government are useless. I don't trust them. If they were any better at their job, I think they would be much more dangerous.
No, if they were better at their job, if we had a better thinking government, we'd be in a far better position, Gareth. Because they are useless, we are in the state that we're at.
No, you guys are making big statements. So Ntabi, you talk about the fact that the policies that they've got in place and the policies that they have made work are policies that work better for multinationals than for South Africans. That's exactly the point. If they were better at it, if they were thinking in big term and they were thinking more about the people of South Africa, they would have better policies that work for the people of South Africa. Can I introduce something? Can I introduce something to the discussion, if you will allow me? There's something I want to propose that maybe just to look at it differently. So South Africa has quite a unique opportunity, I'll put it like that, from what you're talking about, the capacity of the state, the capacity of the economic cluster. South Africa does have, I believe, economic muscle, right? Economic muscle, and I explain why I say that. We've got compounded annual growth rate that is the fastest, one of the fastest in the capital markets. South Africa's pension funds, we privatized our pension fund. So what we did is we set up what we call the Government Employee Pension Fund, amalgamated several pension funds after 1994, in the late 90s, created this PIC that we manages the GPF, which is the Government Employee Pension Fund. We currently have more than 4 trillion alone in the GPF, which is being managed by the PIC. That money is safeguarded. I want to tell you that. The perception that's been created is that the few unlisted instruments that have been misused become the talk of the town, and that's all that's focused on. But we have more than 8 trillion in the capital market surplus that we're not talking about. Now, here's where I think there's an opportunity. South Africa has strong technocrats at Treasury. South Africa has capabilities with what we call triple Ps. South Africa has capabilities with developing infrastructure. We have engineers in South Africa that develop infrastructure all the way to Cairo, from here to from the Cape. We must use our pension funds. We must use our pension funds more adequately and more productively to develop the country. And we have surpluses and positives that need to be enhanced to do that. And I think that's where we need to discuss. That's one of my recommendations you asked about.
When you say we must utilize these pension funds better, the last thing we want is to open the doors to Treasury to run that. It sounds like that's what you're advocating here. These are precisely people who've mismanaged this into the hole we're in. If you take people's hard-earned pensions, that's not government's money. That's money that people in employment in South Africa have saved themselves. That's private.
I want to explain.
You can't let the government use that money. I'm terribly sorry.
So let me I didn't say government. So I want to explain. I'm saying use it for productive investment. So let me explain what I mean. This doesn't mean giving it to government. So several countries in the world, including OECD economies, they create what is called an infrastructure asset class. This is not taking money, giving it to government. It's taking it to infrastructure via bonds. It's taking it to infrastructure via instruments in the unlisted equity, unlisted bond market, and also your fixed income security market. And you see various funds across the world have massive allocations in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in Portugal. These countries don't have the type of development problems and challenges South Africa has, but we have sophisticated capital markets like them, but we don't deal with our development problems using the tools they use. This is what I find surprising. So South Africa we have the biggest pension fund globally, one of them, and we are not using it. Forget government. This is not government. This is infrastructure allocation into bonds. Bonds, infrastructure bonds. So don't talk government. Government is not the one who's going to take this money.
But this is what you're talking about is great on paper, but here we actually have reports in the news of the fact that they're eyeing this money in order to bail out Eskom. Now, is that the kind of infrastructure project that you're talking about? Because we know how those have failed. Look at Kusile.
So exactly. So the question is, if you're going to point out, this is the problem we have in this discussion, is exactly this. If we're going to say, let's park this discussion because Eskom is being discussed as a potential. I don't know what the discussions around Eskom are. What I know is that the what I call CPIBP in Canada uses up to 7% of their total pension fund, which is equivalent to GPF, to allocate to infrastructure. This is not only energy. Superannuation in New Zealand, 9.9% to infrastructure. I'm taking different countries. Omar's in Canada, 15% to infrastructure assets. These are first world economies. They don't need infrastructure like us. Let's park Eskom, because Eskom is a unique situation. If we discuss any other infrastructure, I'm not talking, I want us to remove Eskom because it takes the conversation to another. I want us to remove it, Gareth. I want us to talk about other infrastructure that can be developed. There's ports, there's road infrastructure. I'm not talking social infrastructure, I'm talking ICT, telecoms, infrastructure that have payoffs, infrastructure that have capital inflows, infrastructure that have what we call returns. These need to be prioritized. And that's why we excited, some of us, when we hear about Regulation 28, but we've been hearing about it for the last 2 to 3 years. Nothing is being done. But I think if we can correctly articulate that into infrastructure allocation, bond allocation, viable projects. Many countries are doing it. Let's not be scared to do what other countries are using to develop themselves. Countries are not going to invest if we are not willing to invest in our own economy. And then we have what we call a crowding in. And they do this in first world economies, and yet African economies are scared and we want other people to come and solve our problems. It's not going to happen. Solve your own problems. Solve your own problems as an African country.
If we were Canada and New Zealand, we wouldn't need developmental economics, would we? I mean, this is the whole point.
That's why we need to do these things, Gareth, because we are not Canada and New Zealand, but they are even doing them and they don't need them. But they are further improving the lives of their people and putting more infrastructure in their communities when they are further developed.
So let's just talk about this quickly, because we've got to wrap this up. I think if lockdown taught us anything, it is that the informal economy and that people who are just trading with each other, whether it's bootlegging alcohol or fake cigarettes or whatever, that is the only way we could save South Africa's economy, not with government. And with government, your faith in the government is just an extraordinary thing in Nthabiseng. It's almost naive. It's beautiful, but it's naive. Phumi and I...
No, I believe in a mix. Remember, you started the discussion by lashing out at government. So now we've had to discuss the role of the state. I do believe in private sector participation. I believe in SMEs. I believe in industrialization. That's not government. You need enterprises to come to the fore, to invest. I believe in fixed capital formation coming in and investing more. So I want to make it very clear that I don't believe the state is necessarily the only participant in the economy. Please, Gareth, we've got to have companies. We've got to have multinationals. It's just a question of how developmental is our state and how is it able to advance and deal with the inequalities of the past? And you can't have the private sector dealing with that. You know why? Because the private sector wants profit. So the things that don't lead to profit, they're not interested in. So who's going to be interested in those things when 90% or more the majority of the population are poor? So we've got to have the state to take care of it.
Honest motive in the world, and someone getting rich makes everybody around them better as well. I don't understand how we could be against this.
No ways.
What? Where's the evidence of that? Where's the evidence of that? I want you to show me who rich is help. Where's the evidence of that? Give me evidence.
Well, let's just take, for example, that the greatest humanitarians in human history are the two richest men in the world right now. I mean, that's just a fact I'm pulling out of the air, of course. Anyway,
who are those?
Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have given more money to other people than any people who've ever lived before them. And that's just a fact. It's easy when you've got hundreds of billions, but none of the three of us do yet. So let's hope we can prove ourselves worthy in some way. I reckon there's a lot more we've got to discuss with you, Nthabiseng. I love talking to you. And Phumi, I'm sorry, Phums, I apologize. Phumi got 7 words in today. Usually she runs.
It doesn't matter. No bloody ways. I think, Ntabi, I agree with a lot of what it is that you said. And I'm definitely going to keep your number. I've got a place for you in the fight.
Thanks for having me, man. This was really fun. It was fun.
And it's so good to talk these things through, because otherwise we come at it only with our preconceived notions. And I'm always pleased when someone on the show will argue with me, because a lot of people don't. And Nthabiseng, you've really you've outdone yourself and acquitted yourself beautifully today. So thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Very good. Well, that is Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko, and she was our special guest on the Burning Platform today. It's brought to you by Nando's every single week, and Phumi Mashiko will be back next week, Thursday, as well. We've got short week this week and a short week next week, right?
Really?
Yeah,
no.
Friday. Yeah, Good Friday
really?
Next week.
What?
Yeah. And don't forget, there's all those other holidays still to come. This is a good time of year if you like holidays. And who doesn't, let's face it.
I've got work to do. I can't do it for 4-day weeks.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our guests this morning. Thank you to you for listening. And we will see you tomorrow, 6:00. Thanks, Phums. Bye.
Bye.